Hello and welcome back to the Weaving Studio. My name is Crystal. If you've been with me before, then welcome back. If not, then welcome. Today we are going to be working on something that I have never actually done before, so I just want to be clear, this is by no means a tutorial. This is going to be me figuring out what the heck I'm doing. So we are going to be trying something called a supplemental warp, which is basically you're going to have a ground fabric, which will just be a plain weave. And then you're going to have another warp setting on top of that. And it will get woven in with the ground fabric, obviously. So it's not just like floating there, but it sits on top. And so it creates a sort of vertical pattern. It's very similar to like monk's belt or overshot, but the difference is that it's going to be running vertical instead of horizontal, and you only need one shuttle, and you're only going to be just weaving with that one shuttle the whole time, and because the extra warp is what's going to create the sort of decorative pattern in your weaving project. Finding resources on how to do the supplemental warp has not been easy, and so I was like, well, okay, I've got some information from this one video and from a book, which honestly was not super easy for me to comprehend, but I'm a little bit dyslexic, and so that's, you know, it could have just been me, I don't know. But anyway, I was able to pick things out of both the video and the book. I think I was able to pick enough out of each of those two different things in order to sort of figure out what I'm going to be doing. Okay, enough of my rambling. Let's get to it. I'm going to start by warping up my ground warp first, which I'm going to be using this lovely 8-2 cotton that I got from Captain Yarns. Sorry, he's got French on the other side because he's in Canada. So I love this guy's yarns. He's on Etsy as well. So if you want to get on Etsy or onto his actual website, you can do that. But I love his 8-2 cotton. I use it all the time now since I discovered it, which was just this year actually. But anyway, so I'm going to be using this lovely off-white 8-2 for the ground warp, and I'm going to be using this really gorgeous navy blue 3-2 cotton. Pull this end out so you can kind of see. So 3-2, so it's much thicker, which is going to allow the pattern that I'm using to pop more off the ground fabric. You can, of course, do whatever you want, basically, with the supplemental warp. You could do it the same as your ground fabric, or you could do like I'm doing, which is going to be a much thicker. And that is all going to depend on your reed, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. So let's go ahead and warp this up. I'm going to do 360 ends of this, and I believe it was 67 ends. I'll check my pattern, but it's 67 ends, and I'm actually going to be doing 3 stripes with this. So I'm going to be doing 3 different warps so that I can have each one of them separate on the ground fabric. Okay, let me get into this. Let me get these warped up, and then we'll get into putting them on the loom. Okay. so now we've got the main ground warp all done, and I'm going to be doing 3 different supplemental warps. So this is what I'm going to be doing. So it'll have this larger section in the middle here, and then 2 smaller stripes going up the warp that way. So I'm going to be warping all 3 of those stripes separately. And the thing to note about when you're warping a supplemental warp is that the supplemental warp has to be longer than your ground warp. So I've given myself approximately 12% more, a little bit, I actually did a little bit more than 12%. My ground warp is 90 inches and I'm doing 110 inches for the supplemental warp because there's more take up, I guess. Again, I don't really know for sure because I've never done this before. But according to both the book and the video, they mention both times that there is that the supplemental warp will have more take up than the ground fabric. So in anticipation of that, I have given myself plenty of extra, hopefully. We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and warp up these 3 supplemental warps, and then we will move on from there. Yesterday, I got my 4 warps done, the ground fabric and my 3 pattern stripes. So I got that all warped. And I also got the ground fabric loaded onto the loom. And I just did that my normal way, back to front. And I threaded frames 5 and 6 with just plain weave. So, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 6 plain weave. And let me show you how that looks. Okay, you can see here that I have frames 6 and 5 loaded with just plain weave. So, it goes every other. And then frames 1 through 4 are going to be where I'm going to thread my supplemental warps. So whenever you're doing a supplemental warp, you have to have 2 frames more than what your pattern is going to be. Okay, so you can see I have from the back, it's just loaded the normal way. And I forgot to mention that the whole reason I wanted to try this was because my loom actually came fully equipped to do supplemental warp. I have an extra beam down there, and this part here, which comes off, just slips off and on here, is an extra beam, a bar for the supplemental warp to go over the top of, so it doesn't get tangled in with the ground warp. So we're going to now figure out how to put the supplemental warp on here. Okay, one thing that my loom did not come with was an extra set of leaf sticks. So I just got some yardsticks from Lowe's and I just sanded the heck out of the edges. Hopefully this will work. It does feel a little bit rough, but I didn't really want to pay $50 for another pair of leaf sticks. So hopefully this is going to work. We're going to Okay, so I'm going to put these in the rattle over the top of my beam like this. Really hoping this works. So for my pattern thread, my ground thread is at 20 ends per inch for the 8-2, and then this is going to be 10 ends per inch. No problem. Okay, and then instead of like way over the top of my loom, I'm just going to come over the top of my frames. You might have to fuss around with this on your loom depending on how your loom is designed. Okay, this is going to work. Yay! All right. Move my leaf sticks up so I can see my cross a little bit better. Oh, I actually really like that. Okay, so show you how I've got this situated here. Okay, so you can see my leaf sticks, my yardsticks back there. And then I've got just the bundle over the top of my frames, and now we're going to go ahead and put them in the rattle. And 10 ends per inch, so I need 5 because my rattle is a half-inch rattle, so 2, 4, 5. And I'm going to have each of the smaller stripes at 4 inches in, and then my big stripe, of course, will just go down the middle, which will make it a lot easier. So 1, 2, 4, 5. Okay, so that goes in there. So I've got 15 ends, which is perfect. Okay, and now I'm going to take a piece of my pink thread here. Just tie that over the top so I don't lose those. No, that was too many. Okay. All right. Now that one's good. All right, now we're gonna change to this one. 30, 33 is gonna be right there. So I'm gonna put this half on the right side of the middle line and the other half on the other side of the middle line. got my supplemental warp all ready to start threading. And I'm going to just talk super briefly about the pattern and the pattern setup. And I'm actually going to go in depth further on how to set up the pattern in a different video. This is simply just me trying to get this done, but very briefly. And I use the I Weave It program, which works really well for this. So this is, whoops, hang on. All right, so this is how I originally set up the pattern. And this yellow space, that's all my ground weave section. And then of course I have the supplemental section here and these two supplemental sections on either side of it. Okay, so that's how I originally set it up. We can't actually thread it this way, it won't work. So I did this is how you'll actually are going to thread it. So I have a supplemental thread and then 2 ground threads, supplemental thread, 2 ground threads, so on and so on and so on, all the way across. Hang on, I can't do that backwards very well. Okay, so, but, okay, there we go. Okay, so as you can see, you can still kind of see the pattern even. In the I Weave It program is pretty cool because you can actually adjust the different widths of the yarn. So I was able to adjust the blue to represent a 10 ends per inch and the yellow, which is the background, to the 20 ends per inch. So it's pretty cool. I like this program, but we're gonna go more into depth in this on how to do this and all of this particular part of it. So right now I'm just gonna go ahead and start threading according to this. Okay, so we're set up here. I've got I Weave It set up to track my threading. I've got 43 plain weave thread ends before I start my first pattern end. So we're going to count, and I've already got these in bundles of 20, so I already know that that's 20 and that's 40, and then I just need 43. So 1, 2, 3. Yes, I know I have an empty heddle here. It's fine. It doesn't mess up my pattern. I fixed it later. Okay, so now we are going to slide over the heddles that I need for this section. So I'm going to go ahead and undo my frame bars here. These little bars hook in here on my frames. I honestly find it super irritating, but it's the only thing I find irritating about this loom, so we'll just live with it. Okay, I need 1, 2, whoops, 4 of everything except for that. So I need 4 of those. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, and 3. So I'm going to scooch these over. Okay, so I've got all of my heddles that I'm going to need for this section. And this is the reason why I do the plain weave on the back 2 frames, because if I were to do them on the front 2 frames, then I would have to include all of these spare heddles into my threading process of the ground weave, which to me just sounds extremely confusing. So and like prone to mess ups and just like it's like an accident waiting to happen. So that is why I chose to do my plain weave on the back. Now, if you watch the other video, she actually puts hers in the front and does include these supplemental heddles as she's threading her ground weave. I just was like, that seems super confusing to me. So I went with this option and I'm really, really glad I did. Okay, enough of that. So now we're going to start threading, and I'm going to start with heddle 1. Switch this over a little bit. Okay, so heddle 1. And another thing that you have to be super, super careful about is not crossing threads. So that's 1. So I'm going to drop these down in here. Okay, and now I need 5, 6. Oops, wait a sec. Something right here because that should be. All right, so I am just going to continue on threading here, and let's talk about how I'm doing that and how I figured this out. So I am doing, like I mentioned, 20 ends per inch for the ground fabric and 10 ends per inch for the supplemental. So I am threading 1 supplemental and pushing over 2 ground threads, and then 1 supplemental thread, 2 ground threads, so on and so forth in the supplemental sections. Now, say for example, if I wanted my set for the supplemental warp to be, say, maybe 7 ends per inch instead of 10 ends per inch. So what I would be doing then would be, I basically just pulled out my reed substitution chart, and I see that it says the order of the sleigh is going to be 0, 1, 1. So in this case, I would thread in the order of the slaying of the reed, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to do 2 ends of ground and then 1 end of supplemental, 2 ends of ground, 1 end of supplemental, and then 4 ends of ground, because that would equal how I'm going to slay it in the reed, which would be 1, 1, and 0. So it's very, very tricky when it comes to slaying the reed for the supplemental. This one reason why I kept it super simple with the 10 dent reed and doing the 20 ends per inch and the 10 ends per inch, because that's just way easier to get my head around. Another thing that you have to be thinking about when you're deciding how to thread this and what reed to use is the size of your supplemental warp. So because I'm using the 3-2 and the smaller 8-2 cotton, it is very easy for all 3 of those threads to slide up and down within my 10 dent reed. Now, if you were using something much thicker for your supplemental warp, you may decide that you need to go up a reed size, so like an 8 dent reed. And if you do that, then that's going to change your ground thread as well. So it's just a lot to think about when it comes to doing the threading and the reed part. And I will definitely go more in depth in future videos on how to do that and how to figure that out. But for now, let's just keep going on this project. Okay, so I've got it all threaded up. hopefully ready to go. I did make a few mistakes while I was threading the supplemental warp, but nothing I couldn't fix up. So I have a couple of threads hanging off the back because I forgot to put a pair in between I forgot to put a ground pair in between a supplemental warp thread, a couple of supplemental warp threads, and anyway, there was a couple of other little minor things, but I managed to fix them without too much issue. So now we are going to start weaving, hopefully without too much issue. So for the treadling, and I've already set up my treadles down below. I did that before I even started threading because getting under my loom after it's been threaded can be kind of a pain in the butt. So you can see here, this is my tie-up situation, and you'll notice over here, this is my plain weave section up here. And you'll notice that, yeah, okay, these two are the same. And I had to do that because the treadling, this is the treadling. So if I were to not have it that way, the plain weave would be all wonky. So, and again, I am going to do a more in-depth video on how I accomplish this. So don't worry, this is, like I said, just a very brief, it's not going to be a very brief video, but it's just a very non-tutorial, I'm just figuring this out kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so as I had started weaving up here, I noticed that on my far left stripe, I kept having this weird sort of bunching going on with the supplemental threads. And so I ended up having to stop and like figure out what the heck was going on. And it turns out that it was just loose. The supplemental threads, for some reason, on that particular side were loose. So I was able to tighten everything up and get moving again. Okay, I got that all fixed up over here. It turns out it was just a little tension issue, which is good. I don't have to rethread anything. So getting the tension of both the ground fabric and the supplemental warp has been proving to be a little on the difficult side, but I think I got it now. So I'm just gonna go ahead and keep weaving. Okay, so while I'm finishing this up, let me talk just a little bit about some of the things that I learned while I was doing this. First and foremost, tension is key, especially the tension on your supplemental warp. Now, if you don't have a second back beam in the bar, you can still do this by attaching a rattle on top of a couple of 2x4s or something to raise it up over the top of your ground warp. You can use that as a second apron back beam. And then you can use weights to hold the tension on your supplemental warp. but the thing that I learned about mine was that it was actually a little bit broken. My supplemental warp beam was actually there's like what you call it, like bounce back break on it, and it just basically holds it in place while I'm adjusting the tension. I did not know it was disconnected, so every time I went to go advance my warp, I would lose all of my perfect tension on my supplemental warp, and then I would have to go to the back and roll it back up. Anyway, I got it figured out finally. So I just emailed Maycomber and I was like, something's not going on right here. Anyway, and she was like, oh, this little chain needs to be attached to this hook. And I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, I got it all hooked up and we're good to go. Oh, I lost my place. So anyway, tension is key, especially on your supplemental warp, because if the tension on your supplemental warp is too loose, it will, I totally lost where I'm at here. There it is, 3. It will, no, that's 2. It will bunch up, like it'll when you beat it, the supplemental warp will like crunch up and it will just look all funky. So you definitely don't want to be doing that. So definitely make sure, especially if you're using a loom that doesn't have the extra beam and the extra I think I am at my limit here. Yeah, the extra bar. So, oh yeah, I did that wrong. Apparently I cannot talk and weave at the same time. I had no idea. I've never really tried to talk and weave at the same time. Oopsie. All right, this is not going to work. I think I'm done because I just messed it up. And I can't really, I'm kind of pushing it to get anything else out of here anyway. Okay, so that's a 2. Then this must be a 6. 4. Yeah, here we go. 6. Okay. And back to 2. This is the end anyway. Probably not going to need it, but anyway. Okay, so back to my tension issues. You definitely want to make sure that supplemental warp is tighter. If it's not going to be the same tension as your ground warp, it needs to be just a little bit tighter actually than your ground warp. Because I found that if it was even just the same tension as my ground warp, the threads would not pop up out of wherever they were underneath, because they would get caught on the threads that were already above them. So it's not much. Like, it just takes a little tiny bit extra tension on the supplemental warp than the ground warp in order to make it weave perfectly. You know what? I'm just going to go to the end of the spool. So, and I'll just see if I can squitch a little bit more out of it. So yeah, so tension is really super important, as it is with most projects, really. But in this case, even more so. I mean, I found I can do like, I've done a lot of stuff with like acrylic and just like regular worsted weight wool yarn, and tension is not as important in those cases just because they're so forgiving and stretchy and wonderful to work with, really. But things, you know, when you have stuff that's not quite as stretchy, like cotton, linen, stuff like that, then of course you have to pay a little bit more attention to your tension. So yeah, so that's all I have to say on that at the moment. What else did I learn? I really enjoyed, I got a little flub right there, but I'm not gonna worry about it right now. I really enjoyed the process of figuring out how to do this, and I love how it turned out. So I'm definitely going to be doing more supplemental warps. Like I said, mentioned before, I am going to go more into detail in later videos on how to set up a pattern to do a supplemental warp. This particular pattern that I chose was already a vertical pattern. I just didn't want everything. There's like way more going on in here in the actual, and I just didn't want all of that. So that's why I wanted to figure out how to do this. I just wanted this stripe and these two stripes, which I think I did. And so I definitely could not talk and weave at the same time. Okay, let me finish this up and then I'll finish. I think I did it okay. Ooh, it's getting a tight squeeze in there. And that's the end of it. So, okay, so let's go ahead and pull this off. I always cut behind my beater bar because this handle is always in the way. So I think I'm going to release some of the tension first because it's pretty tight on there. There we go. I'd hate for things to go flying. Ooh, I like the back too. I might actually like the back better. We'll see what happens after I get it washed up, because everything is going to, oops, I got a little flub right there, I think. Nope, it's just a little loose. That's okay. All right. Woohoo. Okay, here she is. All done. Woo, I could not be more excited. I actually really like the other side too. I might do one bag out of one side and one bag out of the other side. I don't know. I love it. I'm definitely going to be doing some more of this. So subscribe and like, because you can follow me along on this journey as I try to do more of these. So I'm gonna take this in the house. I'm gonna throw it in the wash, serge up the ends, throw it in the wash, see how it looks shrunken, because it's gonna shrink a lot. It's all cotton, so and I want it to be nice and tight because I make bags out of it. So I will come back to you as soon as that is done. Alrighty, here we are, all finished up, washed and dried and shrunk. And I'm telling you what, I am in love. It just is so gorgeous. I love both sides too. I actually really like the other side as well. Probably going to be making some tote bags and a crossbody bag out of this. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey, figuring this out. Look forward to seeing a lot more because I loved the process. I love the finished result. It's just really a really fun technique for weaving. So I hope to see you again. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.